Hilches Metami Mishkav Umoshav Perik Shvi. Hazov, and Hazov doesn't mean Dafka Hazov, it means Zov v'Chaverov, the Zov and the Nida and the Yeledes. Hazov Metami is HaMishkav, is HaMoshav, HaMerkav, B'chomish Drachim. Oimid, Yoshev, Shoichev, Nitla. Nitla means he's hanging on it. As we'll learn Behemshech, that for example, if you have a scale, and the Zov is on one side of the scale, and the Mishkav Umoshav is on the other side of the scale, and the Mishkav Umoshav go down, so basically the Zov is hanging, in other words, he's being suspended, he's being raised as a result of this Mishkav Umoshav, even though he's not actually lying on it and sitting on it, but Lepel, he's being nitla by this Mishkav Umoshav. So Nachamal, Eimed, Yeshiv, Shechev, Nitla, V'Nishan, so all these things, that's how the Zov is Matami, the Mishkav Umoshav. Ketzad? Keli Ha'osir, the Mishkav Umoshav, the Merkav, it has to be Ha'osir, the Mishkav Umoshav. Afilo Ha'ya Tachas Ha'evan, is an Ahmad Echad Mitami Mishkav Umoshav, Mitami Mishkav Alo Evan. A Yoshev Allah, a Shachav, a Nishna Allah, Oy Nitlabo. Nitlabo is again, as we're saying, that he's hanging on it. L'chura by Nitlabo, it's not neged that the Evan is on top of it. Because the Nitlabo means he's being suspended by it, he's being held up by it. So l'chura, the musig of the Evan on top of it, l'chura is not neged. Is Hail V'Nisnase Ala Keli Azel Mikol Mokim, through this Keli which is Royal Mishkav Umoshav, he's being raised, is Nitma V'Nasa Avatuma. So notice here's a chidush, really, the marshal, when he's being Nitla Olav. So the Chura, he's not actually lying on it. So the Chura, L'mainav Kemina, if it's a Royal Mishkav Umoshav or not. But nevertheless, we say no, that this Tum of Mishkav Umoshav is only in a Keli HaRoyal Mishkav Umoshav. Even though the Tum is not coming through Mishkav Umoshav. The Tum is coming, as we're saying, that he's standing on one side of the scale, and the Mishkav Umoshav is on the other side of the scale, and he's being raised by the Mishkav Umoshav. But nevertheless, in order for a Keli to be Makabel Tumas Mishkav Umoshav, is only if it's Royal Mishkav Umoshav. So Nachamal Hoyel V'Nisnasi Ala Keli Azem Mikol Mokim, which is Royal Mishkav Umoshav, is Nitma, so this Keli becomes a Tomei V'Nasa Avatuma. The Chol Echad Midchamish Drachim Elu Heima Nikroim Hu Anikra Medres B'Chol Mokim. So when you say Medres Azov means that the Zov either stood on it, or sat on it, or lied on it, or leaned on it, or was being held up by it. That's Medres Azov. Now this din is how the Zov is metame the Mishkav Umoshav. Now there's another din that the Mishkav Umoshav could be metame on Adam Tor also by any of these five things, which is a chidush. Normally, when something is tummy and you touch it, sometimes when you carry it, you become tummy. So a normal a davar that's tummy is metame either through mago or masa, which means it touches the keli or the person, or the person carries the davar atami. Here there's a chidush that when a person is sitting on the Mishkav Umoshav, when a person is the same, just like when the Zov sits on the Mishkav Umoshav, he brings tumah to the Mishkav Umoshav. When a Tor sits on the Mishkav Umoshav, the Mishkav Umoshav brings tumah to the person that's sitting on him. And also in all five ways, those 5 ways that the Zov brings tumah to the Mishkav Umoshav, that's how the Mishkav Umoshav brings tumah to the person that's sitting on it. The difference is only the Zov that brings tumah to the Mishkav Umoshav makes the Mishkav Umoshav into Avatuma. The Torah which sits on the Mishkav Umoshav, so the Mishkav Umoshav makes the Tameh into a Rishon L'Tumah. Now this Mishkav Umoshav is Metame through all these ways that the Zov is Metame a Mishkav Umoshav, plus also through Mago Masa. So therefore, the Mishkav Umoshav can be Metame a Torah in 7 ways. That's the halacha. Halacha base. V'chein, ha-mishkav v'ha-merkav is metame n'sa'adim b'shiva drachim. It can be metame a person with 7 ways. First of all, b'chamisha drachim elu shishaninu. These 5 ways shishaninu, which the zav is metame the mishkav v'meishav. So the mishkav v'meishav can be metame on adam tor, and also u'b'mago b'masa. This also has the regular din of tumah, which is b'mago b'masa. Kate said. Mishkav imerkav, shedoris olav azov, and v'nitma b'midrose, as a result of the fact that doris olav azov, this Mishkav imerkav became tummy. So now hanegea be'ehanese tummy, that's pashut, that hanegea, that we learned that before, that the Mishkav azov is metam b'mago b'masa, it's an avatuma which is metam b'mago b'masa, And v'chein hayeshiv olav, ha'emed, ha'sheichiv, ha'nitla, ha'nishan. All of these situations, aval pishoy se'evin mavdel has been ator v'in hamedras, is nevertheless hareza nitma. The mishkav is metami, someone that sits on him, that he's metami, that Torah that's sitting on him. Shnemar, vayeshiv ala keli ha'sheyeshiv olav azov. So we learn on Piashmul Lomdu, Shem Mokim Shazov Yeshiv Metami, the same situation where the Zov sits and he's Metami, the Mishkav Umoshav, Im Yoshev Shamator Nitmar. If the Torah sits over there, knows after the Zov sat there, now the Torah is sitting there, and Mele he's sitting on the Mishkav Azov, so he also becomes Tomei. Ma Azov Metami Merkav Umoshav Shetachos Heaven. Even if it's Tachas Evan, he doesn't have to be sit directly on the Mishkav Umoshav. He could also be sitting on an Evan, and the Evan is on the Mishkav Umoshav. Is Afator Mistami Min HaMishkav Merkav Shehu Mitachas Evan. He could become Tomei also from the Mishkav Umoshav, which is Tachas Evan. Aval Bish Ein Azov Sham Ala Mishkav. The Zov is no longer there. The Zov was there, and he was Mitami Mishkav Umoshav. And now the Torah is sitting on this Mishkav Umoshav, or sitting on an Evan, which is on the Mishkav Umoshav. The Torah becomes Torah, the Tomei. For Adam Zeh, Shehu L'mayla Min HaMedres, and he's becoming Tomei from the Medres by the fact that he's sitting on the Medres, is Metami B'godim Kol Zman Shalei Pirish Me'metamav K'mei Shebiyarnu. Now, earlier we learned that there are the Benegei Mishkav Azov, that if someone is touching Mishkav Azov or carrying Mishkav Azov, so then he's Mekami B'godim while he's touching or while he's carrying it. Knows he's metame begodim b'chiburim, and we learned b'negei merkav azov that b'merkav azov is only while you're carrying the merkav azov. So then you're metame begodim b'chiburim. Masha'inkan when you're touching the merkav azov, then you're not metame begodim b'chiburim. Now the Rambam is saying that when a person is sitting on the mishkav or the merkav b'pashtus, we're coming b'hemshech hamishkav v'amerkav. So if a person is sitting on the mishkav or on the merkav, so that person is metame kelim bichiburim. The Lashon HaRambam is K'mei Shebiyarnu. You have to know where the Rambam didn't really say this clearly earlier. So in other words, B'negei Merkav, he said that it's only a din B'negei Noisei, not B'negei Negea. So B'Pashas B'negei Mishkav is Pasha, that just like by Negea. So when you're sitting on it, you have a din of a Negea. But L'chura over here comes out a Chiddush. They're also a Merkav Azov. The Merkava knows this, the Merkav Azov. Now someone is sitting on this Merkav Azov, so the din is that he's becomes Tamei, and he's also Metame Kelim B'chiburim. That's the Pashtus Advar. Halacha Gimel. Ein Azov Metamis HaMishkov, Achi Yinosei Rube Ala Mishkov, Ela Meshav, Ela Merkav. Because we're saying that the Zov is Metame Mishkov, his Mishkove, but that's only when Roiv of the Zov is lying on this Mishkav or Merkav. And v'chein hator shedoras hamedres azov. So we're saying there's two dinim. The Zov is metami the Mishkav, and when a Torah is sitting on the Mishkav, he becomes tamei. It's called medres because medres is kel sayomad, yoshav, shochav, nishan, and nitla. So that's called medres azov. So ein lachamol ein azov metami hamishkav. In order for the Mishkav to go Tomei al Tzumas Mishkav, the Mishkav has to be carrying Roiv of the Zov. In order for the Torah to become Tomei by sitting on the by being Doiris on the Mishkav or the Medres, or the Merkav, V'chein HaTorah shedoras al Medres Azov, Einim Mistami Machmis HaMedres, Achi Yinosi Rubi Olav, it has to be the Roiv of this Torah is being Yinose on this Mishkav Umoshav, only then does he become Tomei. Avalam Nisa Miyute is Hail V'leinogar is a Torah. Ketzat. Mixas Tomei ala Mishkav, Mixas HaTorah alesi HaMishkav, is a Mishkav Torah, the Mishkav is Torah, VaTorah, Shenose Mixasi Olav Torah. So in other words, when you have a person has, a Zov has his hand leaning on a Mishkav. It's leaning very strongly on the Mishkav. But Lepel, it's only his hand. So Memele, it's not Rube, so Memele, the Mishkav is not Tomei. Now you have the Torah, which also has his hand simultaneously on the same Mishkav. Also, he's not becoming Tomei. And the reason is because, again, he doesn't become Tomei from a Mishkav unless he's Yinose Rube. Now, the emes is that even if the Torah would be Nishan Kulei, on this Mishkav, which the Zov was only Nisa Miktsasi, he also wouldn't be Tomei. Because Lepel, since the Mishkav Azov didn't become Tomei because there was no rave of the Zov on the Mishkav, so now when the Torah is on this Mishkav, even if Rube is on the Mishkav, he also wouldn't be Torah. So in other words, the Rambam says these dinim on both ways, but L'chura each one is in itself a reason for Tara. Nachamol, Ketzal. Let's read. Miktsas Tomei ala Mishkav, and then Miktsas HaTor alesi HaMishkav. So the din is HaMishkav Tor, the Mishkav is Tor, and v'hator shenisim miktsasi olav tor. Now this din umiktzas hator alesi hamishkov. In that case, even if kol hator is alesi hamishkov, because since the mishkav is tor, so the tor is also tor. Chure, even in a case where rave of the zov was on the mishkav, and then miktzas hator alesi mishkov, so then a mishkav is tor. V'hator shenisim miktsasi olav tor. I'm sorry. If rave of the zov would be on the mishkav, so mishkav would be tamei. But since not rave of the Torah was on that Mishkav, so the Torah would remain Torah. Hatame shenisa rube al mixas hamishkav ve'amerkav. So you have to have the mix. Rave hazov has to be on the Mishkav, but the rave hazov doesn't have to be on kol Mishkav. It's just like when you touch a little piece of something, so the whole thing becomes tamei. So al derech this Mishkav, if the rave hazov was nisa on part of this Mishkav, so the Mishkav becomes tamei. That's what he's saying. Hatome shenisa rube al mixas hamishkav ve'amerkav is nitma mishkav kule e'amerkav kule. The fact that it was nisa on mixas hamishkav doesn't change anything. V'chein hator shenisa rube al mixas hamedres, the medres is doch tamei. So even though the Torah was nisa al mixas hamedres is also nitma. V'afal pi sheli nisa al mixas hameshav. L'chur is poshet. The din is, let's just repeat. The din is that the Meshav Azov, Merkav is Tomei. Medres Azov is Tomei. In order for Medres Azov to be Tomei, it has to be Nisa Rube on this Medres. If it wasn't Nisa Rube of the Zov on the Medres, he's not Tomei. That's din number one. Al derech zeh, there's another din, that in order for the Torah, which is also sitting or lying on the Mishkav or the Merkav, so in order for him to become Tomei, he has to be Nisa Rube on this Mishkav Merkav in order for him to become Tamei. That's another din. Now we're learning also that he doesn't have to be, the rave of him has to be on the Mishkav Merkav, but he doesn't have to be on the rave of the Mishkav Merkav. You could be Matami on Mishkav Merkav if you're on part of the Mishkav Merkav, as long as the rave of the Zov is on part of the Mishkav Merkav, and al derech zeh, the Torah will become Tamei, the Torah will become Tomei from sitting on the Mishkav Merkav, even as long as the rave of the Torah was on the Mishkav Merkav, even though the Torah wasn't on the rave of the Mishkav Merkav. Halacha Dalet. Now here we have examples of where you have yer rave and not rave of the Zov on the Mishkav Merkav. Zov and rave doesn't really mean rave. Rave means, in other words, if the fact that the Zov is being held up is this Mishkav Merkav is essential. So that's also has a din of rave, as we'll learn b'hamshach. Halacha Dalet. Zov shayamutel al chamisha safsolim. He was lying on 5 benches, which shehei munachim la'arkin. In other words, you have 5 narrow benches, which are in the length, they're next to each other in the length. So the din is tmein. So they're all tamei. Shaharei nisa rube al kol echad mem. Since he's lying in the length, so even though maybe he could really lie on 1 bench or 2 benches, but lepeil, normally a person turns, so Mela, he ends up lying, all of him, on each of the benches. So Memela, or at least there's a chash, there's a serious chash that that's what happened. So we assume that he did it, and therefore Tmeim, Sharinisa Rubi al Kol Echad Mem. We could assume that the rave of him was carried by each one of those benches. Now, Hayu Munachim L'Rachban, what happens if, in other words, he's lying, there's benches, and now he's lying towards the width of them. In other words, he's lying across the width of these benches, so maybe part of his body is on each bench. He's not lying to the length of the bench, he's lying across the width of the benches. The Zav was munach to the roichev of the benches. Is Tehillim. He wasn't carried by any of them, because each one of them, only part of him was carried on. His body, the length of his body, each part of the length of his body was on one of the benches. Now, v'im yoshin aleim, however, if he lied down on them, so then benkach or benkach tmeim, either way, the benches are tummy, because why? Because shemen is hapach aleim. Because even though he taka lied down and he was lying to the width of the benches, so maybe only part of his body was on each bench, but there's a concern that maybe while he was sleeping he turned around, and Mamela, he was part of the time that he was sleeping, it was to the length of the benches, and he was lying on an entire bench. Most of him was lying on one bench. Shemen is hapach aleim, v'nimtza rubi al kol echad. So that's din number one. So the din is nachama, when a person has benches to the length and he's lying to the length, so then we say that they're all tummy. If he's lying to the width, so they're not tummy, because lepel, each bench is not really holding up reva of the zov. On the other end, if the zav was sleeping, so we're chayshish that maybe he turned around, and memela, all the benches are tummy. Now, hoya mutal al shisha kelim, ho asuin lemishkav, he was lying on 6 kelim. Shtei yodav al shnayim, 2 of his hands, his 2 hands, each one was like on a different, let's say, pillow. Ushtei raglav al shnayim, his 2 legs were also on 2 different pillows. And v'reishi al echad, and his head was on another pillow. And v'gufi al echad, and his body, his torso, was on one of them. So then the din is, ein tami mishum mishkav elazeh shetachas gufi, the one that's under his body, not the one that's under his legs or his or his hands or his head, but his body shari nisa rubi olav, because most of his body, most of his weight is doch in his body, not in his legs, not in his hands, and not in his head. So therefore, only the pillow, so to speak, which is under the body, that's the one that has a din of tumas Mishkav Umoshav. Mashenka, the pillow that was under his hands, the one that was under his feet, the one that was under his head, doesn't have a din of tumas Mishkav Umoshav, because it wasn't Nisa Rubi Olav. Now, Amad al Shtei Mishkavis, when a person was standing on 2 Mishkavis, Ragli Achas al Echad, V'Ragli Shni al Hasheni, so the din is Shneim Tmeim, because since over here, since each one is essential, and each one is essential for standing, he needs both legs to stand. So Mamela, so that's considered that he's standing completely on each one of those pillars. It doesn't literally have to be most of the body. Because we'll soon learn Behamshel that it has to be that this Mishkav Umoshav has to be essential in holding him up. Halacha hey, hoye yeshiv al gabi mita. Barbo mishkav is tachas arba ragli hamita, is kulam tmeis, mepnei she'ena yechel lamed al sholish. So since each regel is essential for keeping the zov up, so therefore it's considered as if nishal akule. Whereas we're seeing over here, it's not the pshat is that, if it's standing, just like it's standing on 2 legs. So even though the pale, it's not reiv hazov, but the pale, since the zov, it needs both legs in order to be able to stand, so therefore it's considered that its kule is nishan on this Mishkav Umoshav. Al is over here. Even though there are 4 legs, and each leg is l'chura only holding up 25%, but nevertheless, since each leg is essential for holding up this zov, so therefore it's considered that it's nishan al kule. So there, the Gemara in Shabbos compares it to the din of Zeini Yochel. B'negei Shabbos, just like by Zeini Yochel, so it's a din that each one did the whole malacha. So Aldera is over here. Since it's Zeini Yochel, it knows it's essential. Each leg is essential for holding up the Zov. So it has a din as if that this leg is holding up the entire Zov. Even though Lepel, there's other legs also. So each leg has a din that it's holding up the entire Zov. Halacha Vav. Hoyer Reichev al Gabi Behema, Barbo Mishkavis Tachas Aber Ragla. So the din is Kulon Teheres. Why? Mepnei Behema Yechela Lamed al Sholish. A behema doesn't need 4 legs. Not like a mita. The Gemara says that it needs 4 legs. Masha'inkan a behema could stand with 3 legs. V'nimtzas haravias misayeh. So the 4th one is just an extra, so to speak, an extra siyua. U'misayeh ein b'mamish, and misayeh is ein b'mamish. V'cheil v'cholachas ruya liyas misayeh. So in other words, each one, in other words, obviously you can't have all 4 misayim. You have to have 3. But since each one could be the Messiah, we don't know. No, Lepela was standing on 3. We don't know which 3 it was. And since we don't know so there's no huchzik tum in any of them. So therefore they all have a din of teres. So over here we're saying that no, it's really a suffix. It's not really clear because L'chure was standing on three, and we're not sure which three. And the three that it was standing on, all three of them were necessary. Because if they would be standing on four, so we'll say they were standing on four, and one of those four wasn't necessary. So maybe each one you could say he's the not necessary. The Rambam is saying no, he was standing on three. He could have been standing on three. and there was one that he wasn't standing on, and that's the Messiah, or he wasn't really completely leaning on that. That was the Messiah in Bimamish. And since we don't know which one, and there's lei hulzikatuma ba'achas mem, so therefore kulan teiris. He has to understand, because earlier we said beneged of Salim, that over there we say they're kulan tmeis. Maybe over there it's because it's hulzika that mistama he leaned over and he went over. In other words, Masha'inkan over here, since it's lei hulzik atuma b'achas mem, therefore lefichach kulan teiris. Lefichach, im hoye mishkav echad munach tachas shtei yedei behema, etachas shtei ragla, etachas yod v'ragla. So then it's a tummy, because he obviously can't give zechayetza without that mishkav Amerikov. In other words, he needs to have the least he could have is three. He could have three. With three, he can give zechayetza, but with two, he can't give zechayetza. So if you have a mishkav under either two legs or the front legs or the hind legs, or a leg and one leg and one the foreleg. So in either way, that is a tummy. Sharivadei nisa azov al mishkav zeh sheina b'chei meichel lamed al shtayim. So that's considered tummy. So Nekudas Hadin is that in order for the Zov to make something with the Mishkav Amerikov, it has to be Nisa Rube on the Mishkav Amerikov. And we're learning that the Taich of Rube means that it's essential for the Zov to be able to be lying on it. In other words, even though it's, let's say, four legs, so we also consider each one Rube, because each one is essential for the Zov to be able to be lying. Halacha Zayin. Yoshav Hatome al Keres Beis Habad. So you have a Keres Beis Habad, a big beam in a Beis Habad, in order to squeeze out the olives. And now you have the ekel is the basket in which you have already the pselis of the olives. In other words, the olives are already squeezed out, and now you put it into the ekel, which is a basket, in order to continue and squeeze out what's ever left in the klipa of the zephys, in the what's coming out in the pselis of the zayis. Nochamo. Yoshev Atomi al Keres Beis Habad. The Tomi was sitting on top of the Kere, and now there's Kalim in the Ekel, and by those Kalim you have to say are Kalim which are ruling the Mishkav Umoshav. So the din is, so since this Beis Habad is squeezing into this Ekel, so in Mela, so this person is considered, this person that's sitting on top of the Beis Habad is considered that he's being the Mishkav Azov on the Kalim or on the Ekel. Yoshev Atomi al Keres Beis Habad is kol ha-kelim shebe-ekel tmeim. All the kelim that are in the ekel are tamei. Shareihem ritzutzim tachas ha-kere, because they're squeezed under the kere. So it's considered that this person that's sitting on top of the Beis Habad is sitting on the kelim which are in the ekel, which partially we have to say that we're dealing with kelim which are ruil mishkav l'meishav. Avalim Yoshev al machbe shel kevis. A machbe shel kevis means like a press of the keva is someone that washes clothes, and he has a press, and that press is, you tie it down. You have like a board on the bottom. You have a board, like a table, a board, and on top of that board comes like the press, and the press goes down onto the board. And now the person is sitting on top of this press, and it's going down onto the board. And we're saying that, let's say on this board there's a keli, which is royal mishkav l'meishav, or the board itself is maybe royal mishkav l'meishav. So the question is, since the zov is sitting on this machbesh, and this machbesh is pressing down onto the board, so l'chure, or to the kelim which are on top of the board, so l'chure, so that those kelim should have a din of mishkav azov. So we say no, that machbesh which goes onto the board doesn't mamish press onto it. By the Beis Habad, in the Beis Habad, the Keres Beis Habad, the Keres Beis Habad press on to this Ekel. As soon as they press on, so it's over there, it's ritzutzim tachas hakera, like squeezed under the kera. So therefore, it's considered that it's mishkav azov. Masha'inkan over here, since this machbesh, this press, even though it's a press, but it doesn't vices press onto the board. There's like some space in between, a tiny bit of space between the press and the board. So therefore, the kelim which are under this board are not under this press are not considered that they are the zov is sitting on it. Let's go nachmal. Avalim yoshav al machbish al kevish. If you're sitting on top of the press of a kevis of a launderer, is a kelim shetachas luach hamachbish. Those kelim which are under the board of this press is tahirim. Why? Mipnei shehu rafui. Because the machbesh doesn't come down and squeeze down onto the table. It's loose. The machbesh is not sitting on those kelim. The machbesh is sitting. The machbesh is like it's a contraption that there's a table, and this table has an attachment, some type of a press to this table, and they're all standing on the legs of the table. They're standing on the legs of the table. The machbesh is not lying on the kelim which are in between the machbesh and the kelim. In other words, if the machbesh would squeeze down onto the kelim, so then we're saying the machbesh is standing on those kelim, and therefore when the zov is sitting on the machbesh, so he's sitting on those kelim. Masha'inka, once we establish that the machbesh is not really pressing down onto the kelim which are in between the machbesh and the table, so therefore when the person is sitting on the machbesh, he's not really sitting on those kelim. The machbesh is really being supported by the legs of the table. Not on the kelim which are under the machbesh. If a person would want to put a knife in between the press and the kelim which are lying on the table, which the machbesh is on top of, machnas he could. Even though the press is tied to the table, so they're connected, and obviously they're very close to each other, and that's why it's accomplishing pressing, but it's not mamish leaning. And since it's not mamish leaning, so therefore we're not going to call the kelim, which are tachas hamachbesh, that it's considered mishkav hazov, nochamal. You have a press, and that press is on a table, and the press and the table are squeezed together, but they're not squeezed together mamish. They're squeezed together in a way that there's still a little bit space, so you can put a knife in there. And now you have, let's say, a sheet under this press on top of the table. And now you have someone that's a zov that's sitting on top of the press. So the churi is sitting on top of the sheet. Sitting on top of the sheet, so the sheet should have a din of mishkav azov. So we say no. The sheet doesn't have a din of mishkav azov. Why? Because since lapel, the press is not leaning onto the sheet tightly. You could put something in between the press and the sheet. So mainly you can't say that the zov is leaning on the sheet. By the Beis Abad, over there, the Kairos Beis Abad was leaning onto the akel. It was pressing onto the akel. So if the zov is sitting on the Kairos, so it's considered mishkav azov. Mashenka over here, it's not considered mishkav azov. That's this thing. Halacha ches. Zov shedoras al keli shelei nasa lemishkav lemeshav lemerkav. Till now we're talking about a keli which is nasa lemishkav lemerkav. However, if a zov steps, the darav we said before includes omad, yoshav, shochav, nishan, nitla. So if a zov was daras al keli shalei nasa lemishkav lemeshav lemerkav, is afal pi shehu royal lemishkav. It's royal lemishkav, but it wasn't nasa lemishkav. Is hail v'lei nogabe is arizah Torah. This whole din of tumas mishkav lemeshav is a chidush. If it was noga, so tamim etzad noga, and it would only be a rishon l'tumah. Masha'inkin, if he wasn't noga, so his Torah is not only, he's not a rishon l'tumah, he's not an avatum, he's not a b'chlal tamim. Shari emum le ameid v'nasim lachtenu b'klizeh. Because when a person sits down in a keli which is lei nasal mishkav lemeshav, so we tell him, what are you sitting on it? L'chura, right now is ameid v'nasim lachtenu, and therefore we're going to learn that there's a pasuk that teaches us that only something which is royal mishkav, or something which is osil mishkav, over there, asher yeshiv olav, so over there, that's something which is mekabel tumas mishkav v'meshav. And Rashainkin, something, when you sit on something, which when you see him sitting there, we say to him, Ameid v'nasim lachteno, knows what are you sitting there for? So that's not mekabel tumas mishkav v'meshav. Kesad. Kofa saw, you have a keli which is a saw, which is a large keli, and you turned it over, v'yoshev Allah, and you sat down on it. Or kofa areva, you have, let's say, a bowl which you do things in it, and you turned it over, and also v'yoshev Allah. Sheyoshev al Porechas, you have a curtain, and you lie down the curtain, you're sitting on the curtain. Al Kelish Svina, or the sail of a ship. All these things are not made to sit on. So the din is Harei Terim, Shnemer Asher Yeshiv Alav. It doesn't say Asher Yoshev Alav, it says Asher Yeshiv Alav, which he will sit. So we learn now HaMiyuchad Liyeshiva, something which is Miyuchad Liyeshiva, Le She'emrim Le'amed V'nasim Lachtenu. Something that we say Amed V'nasim Lachtenu, and it's not Asher Liyeshiva, that is not something which is Mekabel Tumas Mishkav Umoshav. Now, Hoya Keli Mishamish Liyeshiva Im Malachtish Nasalo, because when you have a chair, the chair was Nasa Liyeshiva. When you have a sheet, the sheet was Nasa Lemishkav. You're supposed to lie on the sheet. But you can have a Metzias of a Keli, which the Keli wasn't really made Lemishkav. It is another thing. But it's normal to also have Mishkav with this Keli. You know, this Hoya Keli Mishamish Liyeshiva Im Malachtish Nasalo. In other words, it's a regular thing that with the Malachtish Nasalo, it's also Mishamish Liyeshiva. So the din is Areza Mistambe B'medres. Again, her redid. Her redid is like a large shawl that a woman wears. She covers her hair and she covers part of her body. And when she sits down, she also sits on this redid. So even though the redid is not made to sit down on, but lepel it's made for whatever purpose the shawl is. But the violet it's made also that together with its purpose you'll be able to sit down on it. And also choluk. A choluk is a shirt or a large clothes that covers your body. So also the purpose of the choluk is to cover your body as a piece of clothes. But lepel, the seder advarim is that this piece of clothes you also sit on. Whereas when you sit down, so you sit down on this piece of clothes. And al derez of atalis, or v'aturmel, v'achemes. Turmel and chemes is certain pouches which you hold things in it. So even though it's made to hold things in it, but it's natural that together with holding it, you're also going to lie down on it. You're going to lie down on it. You'll take things out of it. But lying down on it is part of the process. The purpose that you made these things weren't lemishkav, but nevertheless, something together with malachte could be mishamish lemishkav. That's also called asui lemishkav. And the asui lemishkav doesn't mean something that has to be mamish asui lemishkav. But the ikar is that it shouldn't be something which we say, "What are you doing mishkav over here?" That it's not. המטמא במדרס, וכלים שאין מטמא במדרס, ואיזה כלי רוי לישיבה, ואיזה רוי לשכיבה, ואיזה לא רוי לרחיבה, this all will be nisbar in Hilchas Kelim.